Well, good evening and welcome to About the Valley. And tonight my guest is Paul Landry. Paul is a retired Massachusetts State Police trooper. And now you work at the Museum and Learning Center
Yes, that's correct.
right here in Whitensville, in the
Beautiful.
former bank building.
Beautiful downtown Whitensville.
Yes, you're right in our new historic district.
Yeah.
So you're actually part of the national park.
I want to start off by welcoming our new class. We graduated 75 troopers this morning. They were sworn in by Governor Healy in Springfield.
At the
So-
auditorium.
In the auditorium, yeah. 6 months ago, they started with 150 recruits. We graduated 75
So
today.
it was about 50%.
That's about the norm, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm told there's gonna be another class in April. I'm not sure how many.
Yeah, because there is a need right now, isn't there?
We're way down,
Yeah.
yeah. We're way down from retirements and, just everybody's getting older.
Right, right, and, you know, you gotta, it's a forced retirement,
Well, it was a forced retirement. It used to be 50,
right,
which was very young, actually.
yeah,
But then they changed it to, you can be 100 if you can pass the physical and the
oh.
shooting, if you can, there's no age limit.
Well, I think that's good, because you
federal
lose a lot
government-
of experience.
You do, but it is a young person's job. You don't
Well,
want
yeah,
a
but there
70-year-old
are
guy.
administrative jobs
Yeah,
that you could go into and,
you can, but if you're a trooper, you gotta be able to do what a trooper does.
yeah, you're out on the
So,
road. Especially, in most cases, you're out on the road by yourself.
You're always by yourself, pretty
Yeah.
much always, yeah. And your nearest backup is usually quite far away.
Yes,
Their coverage can be 100 miles of road. It's quite
yeah, especially
extensive.
out in the western part of the state.
Yeah, yeah, they need people out there, and, the more we can get, the better,
Right,
So I want to congratulate them. I'd also like to thank the town. Northbridge, we've been here about a year and a half. They're unbelievable. We have families, we have kids, we have just, it's overwhelming, to get all of these families that are right around the area.
yes,
It's really something. And we had, of course, Vinnie Osterman, who owns our building.
right.
He was very good to us. He's been super. And the building is beautiful. The grounds are beautiful. We have plenty of parking. I can't say enough. He's just helped
It
us
was
so
good Vinnie
much.
bought that building, because the bank pulled out and they wanted to get rid of the building. Fortunately, he came in and bought it.
The building is beautiful.
It's a historical part of that square,
Exactly.
so you've got to retain that building.
So we're hoping to be there for, a while. And also a company across the street, Access, that's
Yes.
in the mill.
Oh, the display work they did is
They
fantastic.
put in a lot of graphics on our walls.
Yes,
All of our hanging things,
Oh,
they put
yeah.
in these tracks with airplane wire. And
if people haven't been there, they're missing a really good display and some great history about the state police.
it's a phenomenal history. We began in 1865, as you know. And what I find fascinating is we were formed a couple of days after Lincoln was assassinated. The war had just ended.
Yes,
We began in 1865. 15 years after we began was the gunfight at the OK Corral. 20
it puts it in more perspective.
20 years after we
Yeah.
began was Little Bighorn, Custer's Last Stand.
Wow,
So we've been around since the Cowboys and Indians.
yeah,
And a lot of that history, as you know, comes from Northbridge in the form of Samuel Fletcher,
yes.
who was one of our first constables in
Yes.
the 1860s. Spectacular story.
And a lot of people don't realize, back then, there weren't local police forces.
No, a town might have had a constable or a chief, but there was no men.
Right.
I mean, again, back then, you were
Right, you
lucky
had
to
no
have.
patrols.
No, you were lucky to have a person.
Yeah.
Usually he was on call.
Yeah,
So you'd call him at his house and he would respond sometime. And that went for quite a while. We've always backed up the local departments, and they've always backed us up, and
Right.
it works out well.
but you still do that in some of these small communities out in Western Mass.
Yeah, we do. And even around here, there's manpower, but again, like the troopers are by themselves. So
Right.
their nearest backup could be 60 miles away. It's always good to have, friends in the local departments that can help you.
But that's why you need real good training,
Absolutely,
and you do get that with
Yeah,
that academy out there in New Braintree.
absolutely. It's a structured training, it's a stress training, it's a paramilitary training, and there's a reason for it. You have to be able to think very quickly, very
Yes.
rapidly. As you
Yeah.
know, things happen really quick. Things go from, bad to worse in a half second, and you have to be ready to deal with it.
Well, it's gotta be the most dangerous thing you do is stop a car at night on a lonely highway.
Yeah, absolutely.
You
You
don't
know,
know
I-
what you're gonna find when you get up to that window, do you?
No, you never know. I did that in 1982. I stopped a car that was in the rest area with two guys in it, and it was just a wellness check to make sure they weren't freezing. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, February,
Yeah.
very cold, icy, and we had orders to check all the vehicles, make sure everybody's okay.
Right, well, there's a strong possibility someone could be dead in the car.
You don't know,
Right.
exactly. And God forbid that you don't check that vehicle.
Right, yeah, and
And
they end up,
somebody's
they're
in.
frozen, they end up dying.
So, unfortunately for me, these two guys end up being terrorists, and
No kidding.
they were members of a homegrown terrorist group called the Sam Melville Jonathan Jackson Gang. They had blown up a plane at Logan Airport. They blew up a bomb at Suffolk County Courthouse.
Oh,
So, in the car, they each were armed with a 9mm automatic. They both had bulletproof vests, which I had never heard of. They had a machine gun, .45 caliber, a shotgun, a .380 automatic,
oh my, they got an asshole in
Yeah.
their car.
and over 250 rounds of extra ammunition.
Oh my God,
And
and you're all alone,
I had 6-shot revolver.
by yourself.
Yes, but I did call for backup, and I got a backup, and they also had a Doberman that was trained to attack a German.
Oh my.
But that's what's out there. That's what's out there, and you're by
Were you able to
yourself.
apprehend them with,
Yeah, well, they
Mhm.
shot. They shot at us. The guy that I had initially got out of the car, I didn't let go of. I had him in my hand while the other guy was shooting.
oh,
And he hit both cruisers, didn't hit us, and he escaped. Of course, the guy that I got was in custody. And it turns out they were members of a group that killed a trooper in New Jersey a month before.
oh,
So eventually, they were all caught. They were caught in Chicago. There was only 7 in the group. They were convicted, I should say, of 21 bombings, 18 bank robberies, murder and attempted murder, and they all did big time. But that's why, when you're out there at night, you have people
right.
that are doing these things, okay? They're not just riding around.
Well, you got 290 Worcester named after George Hanna,
My classmate, George Hanna, yeah,
and that's how he got shot. He stopped
Exactly.
the car
exactly,
in
exactly.
the middle of the night.
And they spoke Hispanic, and they basically were talking in Spanish about they had to shoot him because he would have found the gun. Of course, he didn't know what they were talking about, 'cause he
Right.
didn't, and that's exactly what they did. They shot him multiple times, and
Yeah,
so that. But it's
and they weren't even terrorists. They're just riding around.
they were
with
just
a
riding
legal
around.
gun.
Exactly, yeah. And that's why you need to stop cars at night, you know?
Yeah,
And I think most people would agree that it's a good thing to stop somebody and say, well, what are you doing? Where you going? You know, do you live here, blah, blah, blah. And then see you later, okay?
right.
As opposed to just letting everybody ride around your neighborhood and not knowing what they're doing or, you know. So I always thought it was good to take a peek, to see what people, and, you know, it usually worked
Well,
out.
I gotta talk to you about, you had a situation where you did some detective work.
Yes, that's what we're gonna talk a little bit about. This was a case which turned out to be a murder. The body was never found. It
To
would
this
have,
day, it hasn't.
to this day,
Yeah,
this would have been the first case involving conviction for a body that was not found. The last time that happened was a pirate that murdered someone and threw him overboard. I think they said it was like the 1800s. That was the last time there was a conviction. This also was the first case where DNA was used in the Commonwealth. It would have been the first case.
yeah,
So,
yeah, but you have to have a body, what do they call it, corpus electi.
well, yes and no. If you don't have a body, the argument can be, and it probably would have been in this case, they're going to come walking through the courtroom door. And the lawyer looks at his watch. Okay, well, there's no body. How do you know it's not going to come walking through the door?
Right.
That was a kind of a classic defense that they
Right.
would use. You know,
And then they also use the defense that it was her fault.
yes, you always blame a victim. This was a case where the victim was blamed.
Right, and you had no body to show what happened.
Exactly. So the perpetrator got to basically make up the story he wanted to make up.
Right.
And who's to say different? You know,
Yeah,
that
there's
was
nobody to contradict the story.
that was the problem. So this case actually started with the bottle bill. This was back in 1983,
Yes,
and the bottle bill had just begun. And two men were picking up cans. One of the men had a family and he was out of work, and he was collecting cans to help out the family. So they were looking in trash barrels, any place where they could find cans, rest areas, trash and rest areas. And so they were looking in a barrel in the Mansfield rest area on Route 95. And they were way in the back in the barrels. And one of them reached in the barrel and he picked up a bag, and the bag had weight to it. So he ripped a hole in the bag to see what was in it, and when he saw what was in it, he just let it drop. And they left the rest area. And this was a case of if you see something, say something. They said to themselves, no, we're not going to say anything. And they went home. And one of them thought about it a little more, and he went to the barracks, and he said, I found something in a barrel. And he told us where. And again, it was a case of, is it something or isn't it something? We don't really know.
right.
So I went down to the rest area. I was, I think, 23 or 4 days from retiring. And the desk officer handed me a complaint, said, go down to take a look and see what you think. So I went down to the rest area, and I looked at the trash bag carefully, and I called for a photographer. So one of the people at the barracks in Foxborough was a photographer, so he came down, and we photographed what we saw, and we brought the bag back to the barracks. So what we found a trash bag, like I said, and it had a corduroy jacket. This is facsimile, by the way.
Yeah,
This is
yeah,
pretty
not-
much,
not
this,
the actual
this
leather.
is an exact duplicate, though.
No kidding.
So we found this, which is a woman's
Yeah,
tan corduroy jacket.
yeah.
Take a look at that. See if you detect anything unusual about it.
Oh,
Not really.
no, there's not even any stains or anything.
Smell it.
Yeah, I don't smell too well, but,
It had a very, very strong perfume scent on
oh,
this. Which, again, that said to me, well, this is a woman's, okay?
right.
And then also in the bag was a man's shirt, size 17. Again, nothing really remarkable about the
No,
shirt.
we kind of usually got two different sexes clothes here.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, what was unusual about this is, look at the armpit.
Oh, yeah, it's all frayed.
The armpit had been, both of them, had been ripped and re-sewn
Yeah.
with a different color thread,
Oh, yeah.
which, again, that's unusual to me.
Right.
How many people keep a shirt after their armpits have been ripped out?
Yeah,
So it was unusual. But then the other thing that was in there was this.
now you're coming to, well, it's pretty heavy too.
That's a 2.5-pound sledgehammer.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
look
now
at,
you're coming to, something's up here.
Something.
Because, yeah,
look at the end of the
I was
handle.
gonna say, you can see a stain, looks like,
Yeah.
looks like flesh.
But take a look at the end of the handle.
With the eye hook?
How many people do you think would hang that hammer on a hook?
I know, yeah, you're right.
So
Yeah.
probably somebody that really takes care of
Yes,
their tools.
yeah, because that was added on.
Exactly. So we took it back to the barracks and we inventoried it, and we had a chemist from the crime lab come down, take it, tag it, bag it, everything, and bring it back to the lab. The problem was this doesn't really add up to anything yet. It could, though. It could.
Right,
But there's not a lot of blood on the clothes. There really wasn't much you could see on the hammer. So it was a case where we didn't know this. I said to myself, this could be a missing person. It could be a fight. It could be a husband and wife. They had a fight and he's getting rid of the stuff. You just didn't know.
right.
So I sent a teletype out to the state, basically saying what I found, and is anybody got a missing person, male or female, that might have had a blue shirt or a tan jacket, anything reported missing, or anybody, and I got no response, pretty much for a day or two. A couple of days later, the court officer, Jimmy O'Donnell, was over at Rentham Court, and he overheard two police officers talking about a missing person story they saw on the TV. So he called me and said, the only thing I know is a story on the TV. So I called up all of the channels, 4, 5, 7. Nobody remembered doing anything, a story like that. I said, okay. So about a couple hours later, I got a call at the barracks from one of the stations that said they did have a report of a missing girl from Malden. And I'm thinking, that's pretty far away from Mansfield.
Yeah,
But that's all I had. So I called Malden Police, and I talked to a sergeant there, and he told me that there had been a missing person, a Robin Benedict, that had been reported missing by her boyfriend from their house in Malden. So I said, okay. So I called I called the boyfriend in Malden, and he said to me that the last place his girlfriend had been was Sharon, Mass, which is the next town.
Yeah, now you're getting close to
Mansfield.
now.
Now we're getting in the ballpark. And he told me that his live-in girlfriend had been having a relationship with a professor from Tufts University by the name of William Douglas, and that he had last heard that she was going to his house the night she disappeared. Okay, so that sounds a little bit closer.
Well, who substantiate that too, because she was a prostitute.
She was a prostitute.
So that's why the boyfriend
Exactly.
wasn't upset about it. He was
There
probably
was
a pimp.
there was a question: was he the pimp? But the only unusual thing about this is, was she a prostitute? Yes, she was.
Yeah.
How many prostitutes do you know that bought their own car and paid
Oh,
cash?
she did well by for
She-
herself.
She bought her own house,
Yes.
paid cash, half cash. She was renovating the whole house.
She also
So-
had a full-time job.
And this was her property. So
Right.
in other words, it wasn't the boyfriend or the
No,
pimp,
no, it was
whatever.
her property. She bought the
It
house,
was,
she bought the car.
she owned it. Everything was in her name.
Yeah,
She had attended Rhode Island School of Design,
yeah, she was a graphic designer.
graphic designer, and I saw work that she had done. She beautiful
Yep.
work, and she worked for several companies. And supposedly this professor had hired her to do some graphic work in association with his job, which was basically, he worked in the animal veterinary end of the school.
Right,
So I started getting a little bit of the flavor of this thing. And what's kind of interesting about this is that this is before cell phones. And basically, I believe it was even before beepers. So
yeah,
what?
yeah, right, early
80,
'80s would have been
exactly.
before beepers even.
So what they did, they had a very unique way of finding each other. And that was an answering service.
Right, those were common then.
That was common, but it was like prehistoric, basically. And basically, she calls the answering service and she says, "This is Robin. Tell JR I'm going to Harry's in Northbridge. I'll probably be there till 8 o'clock. Okay, so the answering service writes down, Robin calls, going to Harry's, be there till 8 o'clock. Now, 8 o'clock, another call comes in. This is Robin, I've left Harry's, I'm going to Jim's in Saugus. And
Right.
again, it would be the date, the time. Now, you have no way of knowing who's making these calls. All
Right.
you know is when you get these messages, which are handwritten on a piece of paper,
Right,
you only know what the message says. Okay, that's going to be kind of important later. So this was their way. So if Robin called the answering service, any messages for me? Yeah, JR, the boyfriend, called. He's going to be in downtown Boston till 3. Okay. Then JR calls up. Oh, yeah, Robin called you at this time. She's checking up on you. She knows you. And this is, again, this would be all day long,
Right.
all these messages. But this is how they kept each other safe. They knew where each other was. So Robin worked out of a bar in Boston in the combat zone called,
yeah.
called Good Time Charlie's.
yeah, I remember that
Do you remember?
place.
It was, Good Time Charlie's was basically in an alley between
Yep.
Tremont Street and Washington.
Right,
It was a little dark street, and there was this one bar, this Good Time Charlie's, which was a dive bar. I mean,
Right.
again, it was in the combat zone.
oh, yeah.
It is what it is.
People
So-
who don't know the combat zone was a bunch of bars and nightclubs. It was right after, right near the Boston Common,
Exactly. right
And
across.
in between that, well, it's in between the Boston Common and Chinatown.
Exactly. That's exactly where it is, yeah.
Yeah, I'm familiar
So,
with it.
so Douglas worked just outside of Chinatown at Tufts.
Right. Yeah, Tufts was right in that area too.
So his area of expertise dealt with animals, and basically, this guy Douglas was a genius. He was a worldwide recognized genius in his field, and he had been all over the world, lecturing, seminars, everything. This guy was a star, and he developed a way to eliminate the Dre's test. The Dre's test is a test that cosmetics people use. They take the cornea of a rabbit and they would touch their product.
Right.
And if the rabbit was affected, then a human would be. It was the closest thing
Right.
that they could get to a human. But of course, the rabbit suffered,
Right.
from using his corneas. He developed a way where he actually could slice a cornea and grow it so that you wouldn't have to use the rabbit's corneas. He could,
Oh, you develop your own cornea.
so he was getting money, Tufts
Yeah.
was, from Peter, and, anti-vivisection.
Yeah, well, there was a lot of controversy about animal testing. back
Exactly.
then.
And again, he was getting a lot of money in grants because of this skill that he had. But he also worked in the combat zone. And at some point, he met Robin Benedict. We don't know exactly how they met, but his story is a very self-serving story. He went for a coffee, and she just happened to be there, and they started talking, and she said she was a graphic designer, and he said, well, maybe you could do work for me, and anyways. So this developed into a relationship. And he would try to see her as much as he could. He would arrange his schooling schedules so that he could be her last client. He would pay her $100 an hour, which in 1982's money
A lot of money.
was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And, I'm sorry, 83. So she was getting $100 an hour, which means if they went to a movie, there's 2 hours,
Yeah, yeah.
plus travel time to and from, and he paid her. So it was not entirely a sexual relationship. I don't even think it was even close to that. He wanted to be with her,
Right.
and he was happy just to sit next to her
Yeah.
and have everybody think, oh, here's this guy sitting next to this
She's a
beautiful,
very pretty girl.
she was stunning. She really
Yeah.
was a stunning girl. And, again, she didn't smoke, she didn't drink, which was very unusual. There was an allegation that she either used or sold cocaine, but I can't verify. I work with facts, and
Right.
the facts I have don't support it. I never found cocaine. I'm not naive enough to think she couldn't do it, but I wouldn't accuse somebody of doing it if I couldn't prove it.
Right.
So
Well,
this,
back in the early 80s, it was quite common.
yes. So their relationship kept getting deeper and deeper, and he was at the point where he would follow her in his car, and if she went to one of her trick pads in Boston, he would follow her. And if he saw her going in there with somebody else, he'd call the vice squad in Boston. The vice squad would show up and raid the place and arrest them, and Douglas would show up in court the next day and bail her out like an angel. And and she didn't quite catch on, she couldn't figure out how she kept getting arrested. But that was this guy, and then it just kept getting deeper. This guy bought the same car that she had. It was a Toyota Starlet, which was a little car. Now, he's got a wife and 3 kids, and he buys this little, basically a 2-seater Toyota Starlet because he wanted the same car
So
that she had.
he was mentally,
He was beyond what you would consider even that. I mean,
Right.
he was off the wall. I had evidence that she got a job up in Saugus at the Danish Health Spa. He went up there and he sat in the Chinese restaurant next door with spyglasses, and he would watch her come and go. Then he would call the Board of Health in Saugus and say that they had hired a prostitute at the health spa, and if they don't do something about it, they were going to picket the town hall. So, of course, Saugus Board of Health went down. She was fired.
yeah, she got fired from that
Again,
job.
she couldn't figure out, who was doing it, but she knew stuff was going on. At one point, he bought her an answering machine, the old phone style,
Right,
so that she would always be able to get his phone calls.
yeah,
And what she didn't know, that he actually kept one of the remotes himself to this answering machine. And one night they were sitting at home and the phone rang. All of a sudden the tape recorder started moving, and it was her voice, on the answering machine. And they're thinking, how's this happening? They're sitting watching TV. It was Douglas with his remote. So things kept getting worse and worse. He had to be with her all the time. And she was trying to back off a little bit, and he wouldn't have. He took her to New York for a weekend, which means $100 an hour times a weekend.
yeah, you're talking a lot of money.
Now, he was married and had 3 kids, and he really didn't have a lot of extra money. He basically went through all of his savings on this girl. And in addition to his savings, Tufts University money, there was over,
I was gonna say he was embezzling
Yeah.
Tufts.
yeah, he would have her listed on some of his writings, that he would list her as an assistant or something.
Right,
And so again, Tufts was out about 67,000, and his own family had lost everything. So what we found out is that Robin Benedict went to his home in Sharon the night she disappeared. And I talked to her boyfriend, pimp, whatever you want to call him, JR, and he was pretty much down-to-earth guy himself. He told me that he knew, what was going on with this guy Douglas, and that Douglas was obsessed. And I said, well, you haven't heard a peep from her since Saturday night. No, haven't heard anything. So we got the phone records from this answering service. And again, all it was a bunch of little pieces of paper. And
yeah,
again, and basically it would say like, Robin called, 2:00, she's going to Bill's house, she'll be there till 5.
right,
Whatever it was.
Right.
And then I've left Bill's, again, that's how the message was. So when we got these messages and put them together, we know she was going to Sharon, and we know she was going to confront the professor about money that she was owed by him. And we know that he sent his family away. They went up to go shopping in New Hampshire because he didn't want them around when she arrived.
right,
So she supposedly kept calling him all afternoon. I'm on the way. I'm going to be about an hour late. I'm still on the way. I'm not there. She didn't end up getting to his house till about 10:30 at night. And the family came home about 11:30, saw a car in the driveway, and just left again. This is, again, 11:30 at night. And then when they came back, about an hour or so later, her car was gone. So there was a message that she left, supposedly, on the answering service that said, I've left Bill Douglas. This was like probably 11 at night. I've left Bill's, I'm going to Joe's in Charlestown. Okay? So, and then the next message after that to the service was, I'll be at a party at Joe's until tomorrow. Okay, big party.
Yep.
Okay. And then the next message, I've left the party, I'm going to Debbie's house in Randolph. But she never got to Debbie's house in Randolph. So, again, it was perplexing because, again, the records show that she left his house, and his story was she left about 11, she dropped off some income tax, I think it was, papers.
Yeah.
And she said she was going to see Joe in Charlestown. So, okay. So we're kind of stymied, as you can imagine. So I found Joe in Charlestown. Actually, what I found, we did a search warrant on his house. And we had kind of developed this feeling that she did go, but she somehow didn't leave. Something happened then. And we knew she was going to confront him, and we knew it wasn't going to be pretty because the wife and kids were going to be home soon. So we got a search warrant, and we searched his house. And to tell you the truth, I really wasn't expecting to find anything.
Right.
This was days later. This is a professor that's, smarter than everybody else.
Right.
So I really didn't expect to find too much. And so we went down, it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and we searched the house. We sent his wife and kids away, and we searched. And before his wife left, the detective lieutenant that was with us, Lieutenant Sharkey, showed his wife the blue shirt and said, do you recognize this shirt? And she looked at it, and she says, well, it looks like one that Bill wore. And he showed her the armpits.
Right.
Did you sew these armpits? Well, I might have. Well, if you might have sewn it, do you know what kind of thread you might have used? She went over to a drawer, opened it, took out a blue spool of thread, gave it to the lieutenant. Of course, it looked like the same thread. We also took...
Did the threads match?
Yes.
Okay, so now you know that.
But we didn't know it then, of course.
Right, but that was his shirt then.
That was, yeah. We also found a roll of trash bags under the sink, like everybody else.
Oh, yeah.
We took them.
Yep.
So we went into his...
And you got, of course, you got the clothes were in a trash bag.
The clothes are in the trash bag, yeah.
So let's
So
see if
that's
this
something-
matches up.
Something that could be identified, maybe.
Yep.
So we went into his bedroom, and we looked in his closet, and there was all kinds of stuff. I mean, there was just so much stuff that we found, pornography, but we also found her pocketbook.
Oh, my God.
with
That was stupid on his part.
With all of her credit cards, driver's license. We found her black book, which had over
All her customers.
200 names in code.
Yep.
And it was stunning. I mean, it was really amazing. I figured that we would go downstairs and find his hammers hanging, on pegboards or something. We went down, and the cellar was a disaster. I don't even think he had any tools. So we were a little bit stuck with that. One of the chemists went into his closet, his hall closet, and way in the back of the closet, there was a windbreaker. So the chemist went into the pocket of the windbreaker and emptied it. They turned it inside out.
Yep.
And they actually found that. If you could see what that is, it's basically a tiny little...
Looks like a piece of skin.
Exactly. But you couldn't really tell, but...
You zoom in on that, Aaron? I mean, this is really tiny.
But anyway,
Yeah.
but the thing is, you have to remember, he dealt with animals
Yes, that's right too.
So
So that could have been,
it could have been anything.
yeah, I could have picked it up in the lab.
But we took it, and we found out, also the jacket, the tan jacket,
Yeah,
I had her boyfriend come down to the barracks with her father, who was a photographer. Her father, just a normal guy, husband, wife, kids,
Yeah.
brothers, sisters. He came down to the barracks with the boyfriend, JR, and I showed him the jacket. And her father immediately teared up and said, "That's her jacket."
Whoa.
And the boyfriend said, "That's her jacket." And of course, I'm thinking, well, how do you know? So I said to her father, "How do you know?" He said, "Well, she wore that last week when she came to my house in Methuen. And her sister tried it on and said, 'I think I'll keep this.'" So again,
yeah,
that's why he remembered it. I said to the boyfriend, I said, "You smell the perfume, on this jacket?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "I want you to bring all of her perfume bottles down to the barracks." He brought one bottle.
she only had one.
That's all she used. It was a French perfume called Moulinard. Very expensive. That's all she wore, and that's what was on that jacket. You could smell it on her jacket. You could smell it in her pocketbook.
Right, well, now you got everything related.
Now everything's kind of coming together.
Yeah,
Of course, the professor is still saying she left. She went to see Joe. So we got this black book, and we found Joe with a scrambled number that we were able to unscramble. And somebody under the word Joe had written "from Charlestown" in parentheses.
Oh.
Help us out a little bit.
yeah,
So I found Joe in Charlestown, and he turned out to be a businessman. And I talked to him, and I found out that he knew Robin. He had seen her occasionally. And I said to him, "Well, did you see her last week when she disappeared?" "No." "Well, somebody said she was going to your house for a party." "No, I haven't seen her." I said, "Well, do you have anyone that could verify that?" And he said, "Well, you can call my wife." So I did. I called his wife from the Howard Johnsons on the expressway, Quincy, and talked to his wife. She said, "Yeah, he was home with me last weekend. We didn't do anything." And okay. I later found out that Joe from Charlestown was actually Joe Murray, who was part of Whitey Bulger's gang. He was half owner of the Valhalla, which was smuggling
Yes.
guns to the IRA,
Yes.
got caught in the Irish Sea,
right.
and he did federal time for that. Nothing to do with the Benedict case, but
No.
it just
You
kind
can
of.
see there's a relationship there.
So now we know that she didn't go see Joe. What we found out a couple of days later was that Bill Douglas made this phone call that she was going to Joe's before she even arrived at his house. So that's premeditation. Before she got to his house, he's already left a message saying she's gone. So
Right.
he knows she's not leaving.
Yeah,
Premeditated. So we had the hammer. I talked to his wife. The wife didn't recognize the hammer. What I found out weeks later, probably 2 weeks later, was that this hammer actually belonged to her father. So her brother called me and said, "I might know whose hammer that is." I said, "Well, who's that?" And he said, "My dad." I said, "Well, can I come down and talk to your dad?" He said, "Yeah." So I went down to Rhode Island, and I talked to Douglas's wife's father. He brought me down to his basement. Every hammer was hanging on a hook, except one space.
yeah,
He said, "Do you want the eye hooks?" I said, "I'd love the eye hooks." He opened a tool drawer, gave me a whole box of eye hooks that matched this here. So what do we got? So the FBI was able to match this eye hook to the eye hooks that her father had. Her father had given his daughter this hammer to use a year or two before, and she just never returned it.
Oh,
So it was in his house.
so yeah, so he had the hammer there.
So now you got the hammer. I got a call shortly after from Dr. Katzis, who was the chief medical examiner for the Commonwealth at the time. He said, you know that piece of tissue that was in the coat? I said, yeah. He says, that's a piece of brain tissue with
Whoa.
a small skull chip on it. And I said, wow. I said, well, is there any chance that the person could be alive? He said, that comes from the innermost portion of the human brain. He said, that person's not
No way
alive.
they were alive. That was on a hammer.
That was this piece right here.
Right.
So, and I said, well, is there any chance that could be an animal? Because he worked with animals. He said, no, that's human.
Right.
So apparently what he had done was he had taken the hammer, put it in the windbreaker pocket,
Yep.
and it had this one little piece of
It ended
tissue
up
on
in
it.
his pocket.
The FBI called. They said, you know that trash bag that was in? Yeah. That matches the trash bags that were under his sink. He said, we know not only it came from the same roll, but we know where in the roll that bag was. Okay.
It's amazing.
He made several calls, again, to her answering service, all of which ended up, in other words, they were purportedly from Robin or her boyfriend, but they came from him.
Right.
He used his credit card, unfortunately, and when the statements came out, we found all this stuff. So it looks like what he apparently did was he murdered her in his bedroom and with the hammer. Of course, he said that she attacked him, and he just got
Right.
control, and and then he ended up driving her car with her in it to Penn Station in New York. And
Oh, my God. He
He's-
drove all the way down to New York.
well, he was going to a seminar in Washington.
Oh.
He would have taken the train from Boston to Penn Station
Right.
to Washington.
Right.
That's how he was going to go. So what he ended up doing, he told us he got on a train in Boston, went down, got on a train in Boston, took the train to Washington to a seminar. We
Right.
couldn't figure it out. Well, what he didn't tell us that is he didn't get on the train in Boston. He got on the same train at Penn Station that came from Boston and
Right.
continued his way down. So he had bought his tickets in Boston.
Yeah.
So it looks like he came from Boston to Washington. So his story was that he had put her in a dumpster in Pawtucket. And the dumpster would have been dumped into a landfill in Rhode Island, which is supposedly the largest landfill in New England.
Yeah, Johnston, Rhode Island.
So, so her body was never found. He drives her car to Penn Station and leaves it in a parking garage till they get sick of looking at it and they pushed it out onto the street. They didn't want to deal with it. So it's out on the street, and of course it's stripped, and it's everything that can be
Oh,
taken
yeah,
is
yeah.
taken from it.
Any car in New York, you leave it on the street, it's going to get
It's,
stripped.
and the New York PD finally finds
Yeah.
it months later, and they got blood in the trunk. It was no doubt it was her car, et cetera. So basically, that's kind of the gist of the story. He ended up the DA in Norfolk County allowed him to plead guilty to manslaughter with the proviso that he showed them where the body was.
Right.
So he showed them the dumpster.
Right. Of course, it'd been emptied.
It had been emptied for weeks,
Yeah.
and there is no way of finding.
No, there's so much material goes into that landfill on a daily basis.
Well, I even did a little research into that. I said to myself, okay, I throw a body in the landfill. What happens to it? So I went to my town landfill in in Franklin at the time. I
Yeah.
said, well, what's the procedure? He says, well, we have to put, I think he said 4 inches of dirt
Right,
over to cap it.
yes,
Then the next day we start over again.
yeah,
So I said to this guy, I said, well, that sounds kind of expensive. I said, does anybody check to see if you have 4 inches of dirt? He said, I said, okay. So if I don't want to spend the money to put 4 inches of dirt, what if I put a ½ inch or maybe even none?
right,
Well, what does that mean? That means that when you go to Johnston, okay, instead of the body being here, it could be here, or, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because that guy can't tell you, we only put 1 inch of dirt on. He's
No.
got to say, we put 4 inches.
right,
That's the law.
right.
So you'll never find her again, because you don't know where in the,
Well, you don't know where in the landfill either.
no, you know, it's
Landfill's
impossible.
pretty spacey.
It's impossible, yeah, so her body has never been found, and he got to plead out to manslaughter. It was a premeditated murder. That was the easiest thing to prove, was premeditation,
Yeah,
by his own phone calls. And he ended up doing, I think, about 8 years,
well,
9
DA
years.
decided they didn't want to go for murder.
Well, again, they didn't want to test DNA. This would have been the first DNA test.
Right,
And the problem with the DNA was that nobody knew what her blood type was.
oh,
So what they had done was they took blood from her mother, who was Irish,
yeah,
blood from her father, who was Cape Verdean,
mhm,
and blood from her siblings, her sister and a couple of brothers.
yeah,
So now they were able to say that the blood they found had all of these traits. They had
Right.
Cape Verdean, Irish,
but DNA
mingling.
was in its infancy,
This
so
was the
you
first.
really
Yep.
didn't have it down.
And I
to
honestly
scientific
think that they
state.
were afraid to test it. In other words,
Right.
in court,
Right,
because it was new.
yeah, if that happened today,
Oh,
it'd be a cinch to lock
cinch.
it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you still had the situation where you didn't have her.
Exactly.
And what he said is what you have to go with.
Yeah. And he said she left, and, you know, again, she could come walking through that door, the
Right.
courtroom door. So it was, I felt very bad for the family, because the way it was handled in the press, you know, she was a hooker. She got,
Right.
basically, she got what she deserved. And again, I looked at it that, you know, she was a daughter, and this father lost his daughter,
Yeah,
and the mother lost their child.
and never having a body to intern,
And that's all they wanted.
right,
That's all they wanted.
you still don't have closure.
No. And they never got it. Her mother died, but there was never any closure. They visited him, hoping that in prison maybe he would tell them. And
Right.
he never gave up exactly what happened.
Well, if he's telling the truth about putting it in the dumpster, there's no way you're ever gonna find out.
No. But I don't think he put her in a dumpster. I think he put her somewhere where he could visit her.
Yeah,
He
'cause
was-
he
he was
was so
that obsessed.
infatuated with her.
You know, I can picture him, because, see, this is your fault.
Right.
So, yeah,
Now,
the
he's
body,
since passed away, right?
he actually ended up dying of dementia, which is kind of ironic for a genius professor.
Right.
Yeah, he ended up dying. He had remarried while he was in prison, and the wife that stuck by him through the whole thing, you know, he got a new wife. So,
I want to mention before we run out of time, Boston Tabloid, The Killing of Robin Benedict by Don Stanley. That's the entire book about it. I imagine you picked it up on Amazon or probably at
I actually,
Barnes
yeah,
and Noble.
it's actually only about, the case is 40 years old. The book is
Right.
only a couple of months old.
Right.
Just came out. And again, I really didn't know the author of the book. He basically got my reports and everything and photos and put them in, which,
Yeah.
again, it's interesting to me that there was still interest 40 years later in the
Well,
case.
it's a case that really never closed.
Never closed, yeah. Not for the family.
Right.
Not for the family, so. Yeah, it was a tragedy all around. It was real, but like I said, I looked at it as it's a person. You know, you don't get to kill a
Right.
person.
Anybody watching that wants to hear more about this, can meet with you at the museum, right?
Come down to the museum. Yeah, we're glad to have people
You're there
come
every
and visit
Tuesday
us.
and Saturday?
Tuesday and Saturday. Yeah, I'm usually there every Tuesday and Saturday. And like I said, we love having people from town. You know, this is our home, and you know, the people have been great. We really enjoy it. The kids, you know, we've got uniforms the kids can try on. We've got coloring, we've got movies, we've got just all kinds of different things for kids.
So you got great displays in there. You got the antique motorcycles.
Yeah, we've got the 51, we've got
Yeah.
this, we use the 78 LTD in the parades around here.
Yes.
And we're just finishing up a 68 Ford station wagon that we've painted green and white for the turnpike colors. And it's going to have the pilgrim hat
Oh,
with
yeah.
the arrow in it and everything.
Yeah, other than, you know, they had to do away with the arrow because it was
So,
offensive. I
We'll,
mean, come
we'll-
on.
we'll probably hear about that.
I know.
But yeah, that's getting ready. That should be on the road in about a week or so.
Yeah, because when you had the state police for the Pike alone, they actually had their own uniforms.
Well, basically they were paid for by the turnpike.
Right, but
But-
they wore green uniforms
Well, in the very beginning,
at
yeah.
the very
yes,
beginning, and they had
yeah,
green cars.
Yeah, green and white cars.
Yeah,
They
and
were all
they stayed at a barracks on the Pike.
on the Pike, and they were all station wagons.
Yeah,
So again, now they're paid just like everybody else.
Right.
It's just all troopers.
you know, well, when you first started out, you had barracks all over the state, and you actually stayed there while you
Right.
were on duty,
Right.
and got to go home, on weekends or a couple of days during the week or something.
Yeah, basically you would be there for 5 days, and then you'd go home too, and switch off, and it was kind of hard on the
I was
families.
gonna say, it was
was
tough
tough.
family life.
It was tough because, you know, the troopers there at the barracks and the mother has the kids to deal with and everything else,
Right.
and soccer and baseball and all of that. So when they went to the cruiser per man program,
Right.
it's actually a benefit. You know, you get all these cruisers riding around your city
Right,
and actually living in your city,
yes.
which is helpful.
Yeah, and
you know,
they're readily available to get right out there in the area.
you know, with a phone call.
Yeah.
You know, so that's kind of a plus.
Yeah,
for the
much better
Commonwealth.
system.
It's a better system now, yeah. And again, you're not in the barracks anymore, so
No.
you're home. You know?
But you actually, and then you merge with the registry and the MDC, so you're actually taking on a lot more duty.
Yeah, when we back in 1992, again they had their own police departments.
Right,
So when we merged, for example, with the MDC, we picked up the Quabbin Reservoir.
yeah,
Of course, all of the bodies of water that they
Yep.
covered. We picked up the Blue Hills. They had a mounted unit. We picked up their mounted unit.
we're gonna wrap it up, Paul.
Okay.
Well, thank you for coming in.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Stop in and see Paul at the museum, Tuesdays and Saturdays. You're not open any other day.
Not yet, not
Not
right
yet.
now.
Maybe in the future. But thank you for coming in.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was fun.